going to be 30 page. Well, it's 30 copies, but it's 2 pages. Mm-hmm. We're good? If you're just joining us, we're getting a delayed start. Sorry about that, but we're going to be getting our copies of lessons here in just a minute, so I'll kind of fill up some time. This coming Sunday is our VIP dinner, and have you all registered? And we've got a lot of things going on in the building right now to get ready for that. It'll be a lot of fun. It always is. Also, just keep in mind that in this, I just realized this, Terrell has kind of snuck up on me. We're getting through the end of the teaching quarter. We got tonight and one more, and then we're done with Encountering Jesus. Does it feel like we've flown through this a little bit? It does to me, and I know that I have bitten off more than I can chew each night. We left some hanging last week. Hopefully y'all are making use of the stuff I'm giving you in print to go and follow up. You're not, or are you? It's there for you to do that. I'm not going to say you're required to. I tend to do this. When I have stuff on an outline that I don't get covered, and I don't know, Scott, I don't know if you do this or not, but it doesn't go to waste. It usually comes back. It's fodder for another time. Yes. Oh, okay. What was that? Okay. Yeah, tweaking the sound. So anyway, we got tonight and we got next week, and then we're done with the Encountering Jesus. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I did announce this at the end of the study we did. Time the Kings left off from a timeline standpoint. I like the fact that we've had a little bit mixed up that way. I know sometimes people, they tell me that they bore of the Old Testament. I used to say the same thing, that Old Testament's for old people and New Testament's for us young ones. Well, I find that that's no longer what I believe to be true. I probably enjoy more content-wise of the Old Testament than the New Testament. The best speakers you probably have ever heard are those who are able to tell good stories. And we think in stories. We is somewhat a story, or that's the most effective way. As a matter of fact, just a few years back, one of the colleges, I believe it was Abilene, was doing a study of what were the most effective styles of sermons. And sermon styles have changed. They come and go. I used to do, well, when I started off, I did what I would refer to as a topical style, a topical study. You pick your subject, and then you find verses that relate to that subject, and then you run with it. And my very first sermon was on the second coming of Christ. That was the subject. And the way I divided up the lesson or approached it was, let's answer the questions: what, where, when, how, why. And I threw in about 40 different verses on each one of those. 5 to 10 on the what, 5 to 10 on the why, 5 to 10 on the when. All those things, it has the danger of becoming a proof texting thing. You have to watch that. Then there's the textual study, where instead of the topic driving the sermon, the text will drive the sermon, and then you kind of go off chasing rabbits from the textual. Then there's a little bit more detailed expository, and I tend to do that more than anything. If you ever go back and look at my styles, I like to stay camped out in one text instead of going after 50 or so scriptures. I try to stay in one. I'll reference 2 or 3, but most of my points will come from one passage. And it's more like a macro view. I'm not, I want to be able to, how many of you have heard the statement, you couldn't see the forest for all the trees? This is that point where you kind of keep a comprehensive view you're looking down on it, or you're looking at a big picture, a comprehensive picture. And then there's another one that even goes further than that, and that's the exegetical study or exegesis of Scripture. And that is where you're picking out each tree and determining the bark of each tree when you're studying through a forest. It's going through every Greek word and every origin and the etymology of this thinking and the culture, and it's really good for Bible study. It kind of bores as a presentation style, though, unless you're just really into that kind of thing. Somewhat stalling is what I'm doing. I think everybody's got a handout now, but what I was going to mention about this study is that at the time, narrative preaching has gotten to be the most popular, or has gained popularity. And if you think about it, narrative preaching is what Jesus did a lot of. What did Jesus do? He told parables. What are parables? They're stories, aren't they? They're stories. And I know sometimes maybe we get misfocused on this. Preachers like to tell stories for laughs or for jokes, and I'm often telling my preacher friends, hey, I need new jokes. I'm out of jokes. You got any new jokes? Because I do like telling jokes. Gail has probably heard every single one of my jokes 7 times, maybe 8, I don't know. Because being here for as long as I have, I've run out of material. I guess I probably do need new jokes. Now the good news is some of you haven't heard them but just twice, so I can tell them a few more, okay? But I do like jokes. There's something about a story that I really like, and I guess what I was bringing this up for is I feel like there's more stories in the Old Testament than there are stories in the New Testament. There's just a whole lot more wealth of information there. Okay, distancing Jesus. As we open up this study tonight, we're going to be kind of in the Gospel of John chapters 13 through 18. When I started this study, you remember that my focus on this is not a verse by verse or a thorough look at the Gospel of John. We couldn't do that in 8 weeks. We're not really able to do what we're doing in 8 weeks, but I'm cramming it in there. What I wanted to do was pick out the parts where we have an encounter going on between people and Jesus. You may think, well, that was all through there. Well, it is dispersed through there, but not every verse of John is an encounter. And so I wanted to highlight the interactions that people had when they had a close encounter with Jesus. And that's what I think an encounter is. All right. I saw a video the other day. This is a hunting video of a guy that was walking down the trail, and he encountered a mountain lion facing him down. What do you think is going through that guy's mind? Okay, fight or flight, right? That'd be one of them, right? What else is going through that person's mind, do you think? Huh? Where's my gun? And he did have a gun. As a matter of fact, he had the gun aimed at him, but he was backing away and just kept walking and approaching, you know. It's a very ominous feeling to be in a situation that would be like that. Now, I've never been in that particular situation. I've had close encounters with bobcats, but I wasn't afraid. But I just think, okay, that's too close, and I'd make myself known, and they would skidoo. But there's a couple of times, hunting stories, where I was encountering wild hogs down on the Cimarron. And I'm okay as long as I'm in a tree. Well, I had encountered some hogs, and I had let's say, harvested some hogs. And I got down to move them off the hunting ground because the owner wanted the hogs gone, because what do they do to your fields? I mean, they destroy your crops. And I'm there to hunt deer, not hogs. But I'm dragging these off, and I get back up in the stand. Just as my heavy breathing was starting to subside, I heard some other animal in the woods breathing. And I look over, and there's a huge black boar, every bit of 450 pounds, I bet. And I was so glad I was back up in the tree. You know what I mean? Well, he had heard the squealing and had come to see what the commotion was about, and it didn't take him long at all. He got within about 40 yards, and I had an arrow nocked. That was bow hunting. I had an arrow nocked, but he got within about 40 yards, and he'd either seen enough or smelled enough that he just hightailed it out of there. He knew he didn't want to be there, and I didn't want him there either. There's one other occasion on coyotes. Now, I've never been afraid of coyotes. As far as, seeing a coyote, they're real skittish around humans unless they're packed up. And there was a morning, this happened in Hennessy, where I had 7 in a pack that had come through my area of the woods, and they were out there looking and surveying the field that I was surveying, looking for either deer or turkeys or something. And I was, again, glad I was in the tree. So there was some encounters, but not really, I wasn't in harm's way necessarily. I think that what we see here tonight are some encounters that actually get scary. Because when I started this series, I said, let's look at some encounters where you get up close and personal with Jesus. And people did. And these disciples have been spending their entire life, at least for those 3 years, their entire moments of life for those 3 years with Jesus. That's what disciples do. They live with the rabbis. They spend their time with the rabbis, the teachers. And most of these encounters, as I've noted here, have been life-altering and hope-giving, and they've been positive, they've been awesome. I mean, people have been healed, people have been blessed by Jesus' miracles, they've been blessed by his teachings. But there are a few, however, that we've seen already, that have not enjoyed their encounter with the Master. The religious know-it-alls is one big group that has not. In the last week or two, we have looked at the attempt to not only trap Jesus, but to kill Jesus, right? They're plotting to kill him. Nearly all the disciples will get to a point, or they will get a sense that perhaps they are now too close to Jesus. Think about it. One of the things he's going to say to them is that one of you in this room is going to betray me. And there's another disciple that tries to make an appeal to Jesus by saying, I'm going to go wherever you go. I'll die with you. And he flat out tells him, well, first of all, you can't go where I'm going. And second, I already know for a fact you're going to reject me. Now, these encounters with Jesus, most of the time, we look at it through the eyes of the people that encountered him. Sometimes I think it's also good for us to look at these encounters through the eyes of Jesus, to know how disappointing his followers can be, how hard-headed the religious leaders can be, how upsetting it is to him to see religious leaders who are supposed to be leading the people of God in the right direction towards the hope of God in this world through the Messiah, and yet they are only concerned about themselves. So that's kind of our study tonight. And we're going to start off with the washing of the feet in chapter 13. Now you'll notice I have a lot. I am not making a lot of observations because I have a lot of different passages. Let's recap the story. Jesus comes in. It's time for the evening meal. This is the Last Supper, by the way. And he takes it upon himself to take off his coat, put on a towel, get the water bowl ready, and he stoops down and he begins washing disciples' feet. That's a cultural thing because they wore open-toed shoes or flip-flops or whatever, And also we are learning, or have learned, that the eating that's done in this culture probably was more of a reclined posture where you're kind of closer to people's feet than the way that you and I sit around eating. It's interesting when you look at the eating habits of cultures and times and around the world. If you go to India, you'll be in for a surprise that you'll never, you're pretty much going to have to bring your own silverware if you think you were going to use silverware. And you're sitting down crisscross applesauce most of the time, and everybody is sitting right next to each other. I mean, and they're barefooted because they're taking their shoes off out of respect. So that's an interesting thing. Eating is one of those things that you get probably more close and personal than any other social activity there is. And it has that stigma about it that eating is an agreement. When you sit down and eat with someone in this culture of Jesus, okay, of the first century, it meant you were in cahoots with them. Now, how many of you can say that when you go into McDonald's, you agree with everybody in there? Well, I mean, does anybody go to McDonald's? Okay, that was the wrong restaurant, right? Okay, Olive Garden. Because you know what they say, when you're here, you're family. I don't care who's in there. I want the breadsticks, okay? I don't care who's in there. I want those breadsticks. We don't eat the same way they did back then. It meant something when even today, you go to Los Patros? Anybody go to Los Patros? I'm reminded I haven't eaten yet tonight. They're sometimes so crowded that some of the longer tables only have 2 or 3 on this end. I'll say, well, let me sit on this end. It happens at Bob's Grill sometimes. We don't think anything of it. A lot of us are comfortable with just going by ourselves and eating. And then some don't look at it that way. They feel like, oh, eating is a thing you do with others. So if anybody wants to join me, let me know afterwards, and I'll let you buy my supper. Los Patros. If I'm buying, it's McDonald's. He's doing 3 things here, as I've stated in the lesson. He is demonstrating the service thing. That's probably priority number 1. He's demonstrating what I've done, you do. But what he knows about the timing of teaching such a lesson is that this is probably one of the final lessons he's giving. I think it's kind of cool when you have people who've invested their time all their lives into teaching, and then it's like that final moment, or that maybe it's a recording artist and it's that final farewell tour or whatever it might be. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 farewell tours. Tom Brady, how many times has he retired? Have we really seen him play football for the very last time? I kind of believe we have. Don't you, Elliot? I think we have. It's time. I mean, he was way ahead. But there's something neat about getting to hear and sit at the feet of the teacher one last time. They don't recognize it that way, but he as the teacher does. He as the teacher does. So there's a couple of other things he's doing besides just teaching them a serving lesson. He's indicating he's fixing to not be with them. As a matter of fact, it's the next chapter, isn't it? When he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. Because I'm going to go, and where I'm going, in my Father's house are many rooms. I'm going to prepare a room for you. And they all want to know, well, where is he going? How's the way? And he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. But he's indicating to them that they're not going to see him for very much longer. And then the third thing is he's indicating that someone is a traitor. And I think he alludes to the idea that they all will kind of be a traitor, but there's one in the room right now. The elephant in the room is Judas. If you look at the questions, how does it feel to be in the same room with Jesus, knowing you're going to turn on him? Because in the text it said, verse 2, the devil had already prompted Jesus. Now, what's a prompt? Yeah. It's kind of like in a baseball game when somebody says, hey, Joe, you're on deck. That's a prompt, isn't it? It means you go out there and you swing that bat a couple times, get loosened up, and get ready to go to the plate and play for real. It's kind of the cue mark. I'm prompting you. So I'm not so sure that this is understood yet as Satan is controlling Judas, but he's nudging him, prompting him. And I want to probably jump ahead a little bit. I think Satan still can do that. He can still prompt us and nudge us. Yeah. He knows how to get whatever your Achilles heel is. And for Judas, it was being the person in charge of the money bag, right? And we know that there are other examples of this in Scripture. And not only some of their, what's their downfall, what's their Achilles heel, but sometimes we see Satan working in bad decisions that we made. For example, I think it's an interesting thing when you consider Lot and Abraham when they part ways. It says in the text, he pitched his tents towards Sodom. He was looking at things from a pure materialistic, lucrative motive other than realizing, well, what are the people in Sodom like? Because if he had vetted that out, and I'm sure if you were to ask him now, would he have done things differently, he would have said yes, don't you think? Unless he was wanting to get rid of his wife as table salt, I don't know. But he certainly, I think, would have made different decisions. So decisions we make, the people that we can surround ourselves with, can aid Satan's prompting of you. So I think that's going on. How does it feel then to be in the same room with Jesus knowing you're going to turn on him, that you're thinking about this and you've kind of decided this is what I'm going to do? I think still you think it's his choice in the matter. If, sometimes I would be looking at just a serious decision thinking, man, this is a big life-changing decision if I were to go this way. And I really have to, before I, as we call it, pull the trigger on that decision, I just really want to make sure. I really want to make sure. What's the pros and cons? What's the pros and cons of this choice? What's the pros and cons of this choice? And some of us will torment ourselves because we are creatures of fate and think that God will only bless you if you make the right choice, and that you'll be doomed if you make the wrong choice. Sometimes the choices are there, or both can be good if you allow God to bless you. I'm not saying it's wise to say, how would I put it? I'll get myself in trouble. I deal with this with young people sometimes, or I used to when I was more in youth ministry. People that were searching for love, how can I find that one woman in the world for me? There's not one woman in the world for you, and that you are being played by God as this challenge to find that one person, and you'll either hit or miss. I really do believe, and I'll tell a young man this, that the preference thing about, well, is she blonde, brunette, red, green or blue hair, that God doesn't care about that because that's exterior stuff. Would y'all agree with that? Mom didn't really say this, but sometimes I've said, Mom used to say, beauty is only skin deep. And I would say, yeah, but ugliness is to the bone. Moving on. Sometimes I think God's just thinking, would you just make up your mind and then I'll bless you whatever decision you make? Either do this or do that. Romans 14 is kind of a chapter in the Bible telling us that, some things some people do is okay with them, and that's okay with God. Some people over here don't think that's okay. And it's not okay for them to do that. And God doesn't want you doing what this guy's doing if you're not okay with that. And the bottom line that Paul says about that is, indisputable matters, by the way, is that whatever you choose to do, that's between you and God. And God will bless that person for doing it. God's going to bless this person for not doing it. Which also implies God won't bless this person over here if he wants to do it, and he's going to rob himself of a blessing. And if this guy feels like he's got to fit in, even though it goes against his conscience, and he's going to do what this guy's doing, then God won't be pleased with that guy. Does that make sense? God will bless you and be totally satisfied with what you do because you decided, and it's not a hardcore doctrinal issue. It's a disputable matter thing. It's preference is what it is. And God will be happy with that person. In other words, a thing that is right for one person may be wrong for another person. The biggest thing you got to deal with is, how do you go with your conscience? Whatever is not of faith is sin. Remember, that's the last verse of Romans 14. We're not going with that. So there's multiple choices. That's kind of what I'm saying. He has probably already evaluated choices. Do I do this or do I not? Do you think Judas was ever really attracted to 30 pieces of silver? Was that really what he was after? I don't think so. I don't know what I'm sure 30 pieces of silver is nothing to sneeze at. It's probably significant. But 30 pieces of silver, I don't think was the driving force for Judas. I think he wants something that's not happening, and he's hoping this is going to prompt it to happen. And it's like, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but nobody else is stepping up and doing anything. I might as well. Compared to, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, if you want to give me $100 to $400, I would take it. I mean, I wouldn't trade somebody in on that, but it's nothing to sneeze at. But it's nothing I would also risk my life for, or put a friend on the line for. $4,000. Now you're talking, okay? Question 2: why is Peter uncomfortable with Jesus washing his feet? Now, I was saying this the other day to somebody. I think we might have been at the gym. I don't even remember. But I've never liked people rubbing my back. I don't. Oh, it was at the Super Bowl party. That's where we were talking about this, I think. Somebody come along behind me and starts doing that as they walk by. Ugh, I get the willies, you know. There's only one time I can think of. I was so sore one day. Lee came into the office. You remember this? I had him rub out my back because I was like tense and having muscle spasms. And I mean, it was tough. And I was kind of needing that. I didn't like it, but I thought, well, it's for the better good. I don't like that. Do you like people, I'm not going to get so personal here, but I'm not into you massaging my feet or washing my feet, okay? I'd rather not show you my feet. And to be honest about it, I'd rather not see yours either. Is that rude? That doesn't sound like Christian love at all, does it? But I get the point Jesus is making, don't y'all? Feet need washed. And maybe yours does too, but you're not going to eat with your feet, okay? You're not going to, that's not I want your hands washed if you're sitting at the table with me. That's what I want. This is not a ritual to be set up as a ceremonial thing or a thing that we do religiously, that foot washing is now iconicized. It's not for that. And the reason I know that's the case is Jesus' point to Peter is only what's dirty needs to be washed. It's about washing feet. That's all it is. It's not a religious ceremony. It's a service of humanity. It's a social practice. And it was a need. Why is Peter uncomfortable with it? And he thinks the typical way, masters aren't supposed to stoop down to the feet of their students. Students should serve the needs of the master. Yeah. The catch of fish in the boat's one of those, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes? Yeah. And I think this is especially a lesson needed for guys. We need to get out of this macho thing. We need to have feelings too. We need to be able to tear off the veneer of I don't know, insensitivity, and that we're not in a mushy stuff thing. I hate to say this, Paul. Maybe we need to watch Hallmark movies with our wives. I don't know. We need to lay down those things that we feel like we have to uphold, that society has kind of conditioned us to do, by the way, and be more attentive to needs. And I think Peter's pride is kind of in the way too. I mean, let's look at the third question. Did Peter overreact to what Jesus told him? After he says, I don't want you to wash my feet, Jesus says, well, wash your feet, you'll have no part with me. And Peter's response was, well, then wash everything from head to feet, all of it. And Jesus says, no, just your feet need it. I'm not going to wash your whole body. But do you think he overreacted? And what does that overreaction on Peter's side indicate about him? Well, if that's what it is, Jesus, I want to be number one in the room. I think he was always about that. Look at me, what I'll do. Oh, 7 times? Well, I'll do 70. Is it 70 times 7 or 7 times 7? 7. I don't even remember what he said. I'll do it 7 times. And Jesus said, yeah, that's right. No, not 7 times, 70 times 7. So he's trying to show how good I'll be. And I think he is overreacting. Do you believe we ever overreact? And I'm not talking about for getting an order wrong at McDonald's or something else where we're disenchanted with the customer service. I'm just thinking about, do we think we ever overreact when we discover a truth? And maybe it's the truth the preacher told us last Sunday. And we go, I can't believe he went there. And we pout, going out of the building thinking the preacher's, he's meddling into my business or to me, when in reality is you probably needed your feet stepped on. And the real reality is this. The preacher probably preached the way he did because he knew that he was guilty of the very thing. I mean, he was preaching to himself. I can tell you that's what we do a lot. What would be going through your mind if you heard verse 10? Well, let's read verse 10. Somebody want to read that? Chapter 13. Okay, you're sitting in the room with 11 others like yourself. And you just heard Jesus say this. What's your thoughts? Who's the bum in here that, who is it, And actually, somebody's car horn. I don't even have my keys on me. Yeah, I don't have my keys on me, so it's not me. And they begin to say, it says here, one of them leaned over to him. Is it me? Okay. And then some of the other gospel accounts indicate more than just one were asking that. They were all asking it. Lord, is it I? Is it I? And then Jesus makes that statement, well, here's the sign. Whoever's going to dip bread with me in this bowl. Now, I would have to think that they're all dipping bread. And I'm not so sure that he means at the same time that when our hands go in with the bread, but I picture it that way, that he locks eyes on Judas. And John's gospel says this: what you're about to do it quickly. And I don't know if anybody else is in the room has picked up on that. But verse 10 gets my attention. If I'm there and thinking, okay, you're all clean, except one of you's not. That's interesting what he just said. Is it you? Is it you? Does he mean me? That's an encounter, isn't it? That is an encounter. After your feet have just been washed. That's an encounter. Going on into the story, we go to the betrayer of the table, betrayer at the table. This is verses 18 through 30. Basically, Jesus revealed that one of them would betray him, and he has a word with Judas. I just kind of mentioned that. How would it make you feel to learn that Jesus is on to you? Now, this moves it to another thing. I know that once someone in this room is guilty, it's like those murder mysteries. One of you is the murderer. But then he gives indication that he knows it's you. In reality, it was all of him and it was all of us. We killed Jesus. But at this point in time, it's pointing out Judas. How did it make you feel to learn Jesus is on to you? Yep. And I'm not suggesting that any one of us would have done what Judas does to betray Jesus that way. I'm not also suggesting that we wouldn't. I'm just saying I think there are ways in which we do things knowing, or we've done things and then we realize he's on to us. And when I feel like, I shouldn't have gone to that one place the other night. I shouldn't have said what I said on the phone. I shouldn't have reacted the way I did in front of my kids or my spouse. And there are moments you can't take back. It's like that angry email. You'll never get it back, right? Never write a letter or email in haste and anger, because there's some things you can't take back. And you think, wow, that's indicting, knowing that I recognize this and Jesus is on to me. And by the way, when is Jesus on to you? 100% of the time, right? Jesus is on to us. Right. I'm going to put it this way. You and I will always have the opportunity to change if we recognize, okay, that was wrong, to correct it. To correct it. And we will if we feel the guilt. If it's godly sorrow, we will what's called repent. But if we do that long enough, godly sorrow can turn to worldly sorrow, and worldly sorrow doesn't produce the repentance that's needed to make a life-altering change. And then we get into where we're no longer, we become calloused in sin, as they say, or as Paul would say, is it to Titus or Timothy, that their consciences were seared over as with a hot iron.
So what if Judas would have changed his mind?
I don't know. I'm about to tell you something that I've always struggled with. Maybe I better let Sam answer first. Let him get in hot water. This is kind of where I'm at. When we see that ending of Judas's life, that he went to his place, it's almost like to to his lot in life. This is what he was destined to do. And I will tell you right here now, I am so uncomfortable coming to that conclusion, knowing I'm a believer in freedom of choice. And if I read my Bible correctly, God is no respecter of persons, or God does not show favoritism, meaning that if I've got freedom of choice, so do you, and so do you, and so do you, and so did Judas. But I'm stuck there.
But wouldn't God just found another way?
Well, this was prophesied. Even the amount was prophesying. It's tough, isn't it, Don?
Well, I've never looked at it that maybe I have, but I've come to look at it this way. God didn't make Judas do that. God knew Judas was going to do that. And sometimes that's hard for us to understand, just like I raised up Pharaoh for this book.
Right. There's often that comparison to Pharaoh. He's hardening and softening the heart, hardening and softening the heart. Again, the prompting.
It's because he knew it would happen.
Yeah, Sam?
Christ chose Jesus as a disciple to be Jesus'
Yeah. Now, on the surface, I'm going to go back to something Jeff says, because he could have changed. That's what you're saying, right? Well, let's think about Judas side by side with Peter. Did what Peter do, what Peter did, was it any better than what Judas did? Right, yes. The denial part of it. As a matter of fact, how many times did Judas betray Jesus? And Peter did it how many? I almost think that the point you can make is, see, they both were guilty. They both, in essence, did the same thing. And they both had opportunity to make it right. I struggle with this. But the fact is, Peter didn't go the route Judas went into, a self-destructing end to his life. Peter broke down, and Peter relented and repented. I think it's plausible to think that Judas does regret. I mean, obviously, I think that the text proves that he regretted what he did. But again, it wasn't the godly sorrow that would produce the repentance. It was more self-destructive avenues that he took because he felt defeated. And here's what I actually think happened. I don't think he actually thought Jesus was going to ever go to the cross. I think he thought this would get Jesus off of high center, and that he would take out that sword and let's start this war against Rome. And when he saw that that didn't happen, but that Jesus just went like a lamb before its shearers and to the slaughter, and he was going to go that way without resistance, then he feels like his plan failed. And who's he going to go to next? He ain't going to be around the disciples anymore. And he probably lost any hope that, that Jesus' life is coming to an end, and that was that. Is that Absalom? Or was that Saul? That was Saul. I was thinking Absalom, but no, that was Saul. Yeah, there's.
That's self-destruction.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah. Yeah. I think a takeaway for us too is that we've got to be very aware that people may be going through those sorts of emotions, that they have really gone beyond redemption point. And we don't need to shame, or we don't need to, we got to be careful about what we say or do in trying to get people to look at the hope that they could have in their future. We need to do our best to say, hey, it's not the end. I mean, you can change. There's hope for you. I mean, I think God forgives all sins. The unpardonable sin to me is the sin that went to the grave unrepented of. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so some of the blame lays on those that were either on social media or however that happened at school or whatever it was. Shame on us for being humans like that, We need to watch for the red flags, not red signs, but red flags. So let's move on. Peter, in the 13th chapter, verses 31 through 38, wants to prove he's committed. He's not going anywhere. He'll die. But Jesus, tells him, "No, you're going to actually reject me." How does it make you feel not to know you can't go where Jesus is going, and you want to so bad? Yeah. Well, why can't I go? I'm the most committed one here. I'll die for you. Why can't I go? Well, actually, you're not as strong as you think you are. There's a verse that says, "Those that think they stand, take heed lest they fall." I'm stuck in King James on that one, but that's the way I learned it. I think it's in 1 Corinthians 10, 12, 10, something like that. Are we ever guilty of making hasty promises, not realizing, I don't guess I finished that sentence, not realizing what? Not realizing, okay. Are we ever guilty of making hasty promises, not realizing? Who was the Jephthah? Lord, if I get victory, I'll sacrifice the first thing that walks through my gate when I get home. And what was it? His daughter. Okay, maybe I spoke too soon. All right, turn the page. Thomas, he's struggling to understand where it is Jesus is going. Jesus reprimands them for not realizing what he was referring to. Y'all don't get this. You think Thomas feels like he must have missed something? He's trying to figure out, we don't know the way. Show us, where is the way? I am the way. You're still not getting this. And then Philip's the same thing. Philip goes a different approach. He kind of uses a little reverse psychology, and he says, Lord, if you were just to show me, that's all I need. I don't need anything else. How you doing? All I need is just, show me, indicate to me what you want. And then I guess Philip felt like he's not asking for much. He just wants confirmation. And Jesus again still expresses his disappointment that they're in the dark. Judas Iscariot, of course, and then there's Judas not the Iscariot. There's two Judases, so that gets us confused sometimes. He can't understand why Jesus isn't promoting himself more publicly at this point. And why is Judas concerned about who Jesus is showing himself to? Why is it important to recognize the Holy Spirit's role in our lives? With Judas Iscariot, and I'm just looking at a couple minutes here, he's just suppressing any memory when he's in this garden. This is an area where he has been with with Jesus and his disciples. He's learned some of the lessons from Jesus here. And I really feel like, this is a moment where he's really got to cross the line or not. Is this, what am I going to do here? And then Peter with the sword, again, overreacting. Peter, when he sees Jesus getting arrested, cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. And of course, Jesus says, okay, that's not how we need to do things here, Peter. We need to really slow this down and realize that there's another route I want this to go. The disciples they're expecting Jesus to do something different. And Jesus is showing himself that he's not the person of conflict like they want or thought that he would be, but of peace, to give hope to the world, knowing, guys, I have to go to the cross. And I've been telling you this, and you're still not getting it. So I'm gonna close with that, and next week is our last one for the Encountering Jesus. So we're going to be in chapters 19, 20, 21. So think about those, and then also be thinking about starting to look at the book of Daniel, because we're going to study Daniel, diving into Daniel, and we'll be looking at that time frame that we left off from the last study in 1st and 2nd Kings. Appreciate everybody joining us online. So you guys have a safe weekend, and again, we're looking forward to this Sunday and our Pursuit series. I'm going to be talking about the pursuit of success that many people have, and of course the book of Ecclesiastes talks about the meaningless of the chasing after wind. That's our Pursuit series. So we'll see you next Sunday, Lord willing.